Hello everyone, welcome back to another Flesh and Blood video. Today we're going over the brand new and improved Maxx the Hype Nitro with all of the new support that he's getting from his brand new Armory deck. Also, I think the cheapest not budget deck list we've ever talked about on this channel, which is crazy, but mech cards are pretty cheap right now, which is pretty good if you want to be a mech player. Especially with the next set having a brand new mechanologist hero. If you wanted to get into mech, Maxx is a pretty good aggressive option. I'm not sure if that'll translate to what the new mech wants to be doing. We need to see a little more of the cards, but for now, Maxx is here with some brand new cards that look pretty darn powerful. So with all of that, let us get started. Starting off, let's take a look at the hero. Maxx the Hype Nitro is a 4 intellect, 40 health mechanologist hero. He has two abilities. The first is a once per turn action to pay 2 resource and make a hyperdriver with 2 steam counters on it. You can only activate this ability if you've boosted this turn, and all of your hyperdrivers get Crank. Crank says at the when the item enters the arena, you can remove a steam counter to gain an action point. So Maxx generally wants to set up hyperdrivers over several turns to gain more resources every turn. That's pretty much his main game plan. Maxx's main weapon, Banksy, is a 1 resource to attack only if you've cranked this turn, and on hit we put a steam counter on an item we control with Crank, and all of our hyperdrivers have Crank, so it's probably going to be one of them. Maxx saw some pretty good equipment printed when he was first released. Hyper X3 is the helmet that we're going with for this list. As you've already saw, this is a 9 hyperdriver list, mainly because we want to use Hyper X3's effect. This is a 1 block battle worn helmet that says whenever we banish a hyperdriver from boosting, we put it under this card, and once per turn when there are 3 or more hyperdrivers under this card, when one is put under it, we draw a card. So the third hyperdriver or higher will give us more cards, which is pretty damn good. We, of course, are playing the Techloat Foundry Heart as our main chess piece because that's just the main mech chess piece. It doesn't count as boosting for our Hyper X3, so if we do banish a driver, that can suck, but it's perfectly fine. It still gives us those 2 resources for the one that we care about. The other 2 equipment are ones that we want to be using from the new Armory deck. So Fist Pump is a brand new glove from the Armory deck. It says when we banish a hyperdriver from boosting, target wrench we control gets +1 this turn. Of course, Banksy is a wrench, so making it a breakpoint is pretty powerful. And Drive Break, the new shoes, are 1 block battle worn and remove a defense counter whenever we banish a hyperdriver from boosting, so we can get some bonus value there. Of the equipment in the Armory deck, the helmet's the worst, that's why we're playing Hyper X3. But the helmet's still playable. If you didn't want to get Hyper X3, I would recommend you do so, though. You could play the chess piece over Techloat Foundry Heart. I'll put that in this deck list and talk about that when it actually goes up. But you can play Puffer Jacket over Techloat Foundry Heart if you didn't own a Techloat Foundry Heart. Just if you're playing mech, you probably should own this because it's just the best chess piece you can play in the deck. Looking at the main board, we can see a lot of mechanologist staples. Fast and Furious has become a mech staple since its printing in the -IO Armory deck. This is a 0/4/3 boostable attack that if you've cranked this turn gets +1, which you can do pretty easily. But the main reason why it's here is if it's banished from boosting, we can put a steam counter on an item we control with Crank, thus our hyperdrivers. T-Bone is a very powerful 0-cost boostable attack. We're playing all 9 copies. There's a lot of equipment that's really important in the meta right now, as well as we can use this to chip down our opponent's equipment in the early game. You'll notice that this deck is not playing maximum velocity, which you might want for all of these 0-cost boost cards, but Because we're playing things like Construct, Bankbreaker, and Clamp Press, we have a late game plan that doesn't consist of Maxx V. So keep that in mind as I go through these. We're also playing 3 red and 2 yellow, or 2 blue, sorry, 0 to 60. This is just a 0 for 4 breakpoint on a boost. We're on 2 blue 0 to 60s just so we can have a few more blues in the deck. And then the last 0 cost boost card is Expedite, which on hit lets us put any 0 or 1 cost item from our hand into play. It doesn't let us put our Clamp Presses into play, but lets us put into play any hyperdrivers that we have in our hand for free. So that's pretty nice. Our 1 cost boost cards are Pulse Wave Harpoon. This is another disruptive effect that can be pretty nice. When it attacks, the hero you're attacking reveals their hand. You choose a card. They choose X cards where X the number of times you've boosted. And then you choose a card with defense value less than or equal to the number of times you boosted. And then it defends Pulse Wave Harpoon. So you can take key cards out of your opponent's hand, as well as it's a 1 for 4. So it isn't too bad. And we're playing Zipper Hit as just the 1 for 5. And then our 2 costs are Jumpstart, because it can be a 1 for 5 if we have a driver, and Throttle, just because it's a 2 for 6. Yes, we technically have Crankshaft and Big Bertha in the deck for other boost attacks, but we're never playing these. The rest of our reds, the only other red in the deck is Recharge. This is a 1 for 4 pump to our next boosted attack, but it lets us put a steam counter on a hyperdriver, and that pretty much makes it free because we'll get the resource from the driver, or if we've already got the resource from the driver, we can use it for the recharge. Whatever reason, it lets us keep our drivers in play. That's the point of the card. Moving on to, and we're on 9 hyperdriver. I mentioned that already, but all 9 copies. For the rest of the deck, we are playing 3 Construct Bankbreaker. This is the brand new card from the Maxx Armory deck. It's sort of like the Construct Nitromechanoid, but not as expensive. Construct Bankbreaker is a 0 cost 3 block yellow action construct. If you control a wrench weapon and you have 3 hyperdrivers, you can transform into Bankbreaker. Bankbreaker is that weapon that I thought was just by itself, but you have to turn into it. Bankbreaker is a twice per turn action for a resource to attack, but only if you've cranked this turn. And when it attacks, we can banish a card from under it to give the attack overpower and go again. This allows us to attack twice with the weapon without having to gain bonus action points, as well as it is a wrench, which means things like Fist Pump will pump it up, just so we can be a little more aggressive. I think this is just a very good card for the Maxx deck because it doesn't force Maxx into being on Construct Nitromechanoid. It gives him a smaller option, and for an aggro deck like this that might want that smaller option, it's very powerful. The last yellow in the deck is Master Cog. This is the Fabled from Bright Lights. All it does is on pitch puts a steam counter on an item we control with Crank, which are hyperdrivers, lets us keep them in play, which in this version of Maxx is as important as ever. And then finally, for our blues, we have 3 Big Bertha and 3 Crankshaft, just as ways to put counters on our hyperdrivers. 3 Supercell, just so we can make more drivers, keep them in play. We are also on Construct Nitromechanoid in our sideboard for our later game matchups. And 3 copies of Clamp Press because it's really good with our wrench, which is our main weapon. Other than that, though, this is the main core that we'll be playing for most of our matchups. Any super late game matchup, we'll be bringing in some of our sideboard cards, and by super late game, I mean kind of late game because we're Mechanologists and we're losing cards from our deck whenever we want to go aggressive at all. But I think this is a good core for Maxx. Most of these cards can be found in the Armory deck, which is really nice. So you only have to get a few things after picking up the Armory deck. Something like Master Cog isn't in the deck because it's a Fabled. I believe Pulse Waves aren't and Fast and Furiouses aren't. Some of the M's you'll need to pick up, but they aren't very expensive. Since, I mean, the deck's pretty cheap, honestly, comparatively to other decks. Now, taking a look at the inventory, we have a few other equipment options that we might want to consider. We are playing 3 Arcane Barrier in the Achilles Accelerators and Visitronic Model I. These are just 2 pieces that give us AB3, pretty simple. All of our equipment needs to be Mechanologist equipment, at least when we try to go for the Construct Nitro Mechanoid plan, because it needs us to have all Mechanologist equipment. We can play other non-Mechanologist pieces, but since we're on a HyperX 3 main plan, there's kind of not really a point. Which is another benefit of Construct Bankbreaker, is you don't have to play Mechanologist equipment, so you can play things like Crown of Providence if you wanted to. We're also on Galvanic Bender because it's really, really good with Construct Nitro Mechanoid, and we probably don't need Fist Pump if we're going for a Mechanoid plan. And the Cogrex base legs because they give us a bonus action point when we want to go in for our Mechanoid plan. That's pretty much the whole idea. For the rest of the sideboard, Firewall is the only consistent 0 for 4 block that Mechanologist has, so we're playing it just because it's a 0 for 4 block. If you play against any deck with breakpoints, you'll want to bring in the Firewall. Rev Up is another aggressive attack that can be good against decks that can block some pretty big numbers, but we still want to be an aggressive plan against and not go for the Mechanoid. Something like Assassin, we might want to, depending on the Assassin, something like Azuri or Arachne slip through the cracks. We might want to go for the Rev Up, since those are decks that can block pretty well, but those aren't decks that can just sit there and face tank us if we actually go for bigger attacks or the Bankbreaker plan. 3 Construct Nitro Mechanoids are here because for our very late game, our Illusionist and our Guardian matchups, we'll have the time to go for this Construct Nitro Mechanoid, and we'll want to slap that into play and then start swinging. Against Jarl, probably don't do this because they destroy your equipment. You can't go for this. So against Jarl specifically, don't go for the Mechanoid plan, go for the Bankbreaker plan. But if you aren't against Jarl, you're against any other Guardian or against Enigma. I said Illusionist, but Enigma, Prism's still pretty fast. You'll want to go for the Mechanoid plan versus the slower decks. And then 2 Magnetic Shockwave, just as a blue that can sub in over the clamp presses when we are going for our Mechanoid plan. Yes, you might want to slot in a 3rd Magnetic Shockwave. You could go down the Cogrex base legs if you wanted to go up a 3rd blue for the clamp press, or you could go down the drive breaks and then just play the Cogrex base legs as your main shoe. If you really wanted to not have this no block in your deck. Clamp press still has a use if we go for the Mechanoid plan, though. There are times where playing it early can give us some extra value off of our wrench to help keep our hyperdrivers in play. So it's not like the card is useless, but you could do it if you wanted the more block. Other than that, I think it's pretty simple. This deck list is all Mechanologist cards, obviously, like most Mechanologist deck lists. And as I said before, it's pretty cheap. So if you wanted to get into the game, get into Mechanologist, picking up a Maxx Armory deck and then upgrading it could be pretty powerful. But that's going to be the end of the video. Not much to say about this one. Mechanologist doesn't really have anything flashy about it. Since High Octane got banned, they didn't really have any of that super wide combo potential. So Mech has just not really been my favorite deck to play because I like those high-end turns. Of course, I do play at Syndra, which is the deck that has like no high-end turns. It's just all the same turn over and over. But there are some things you can do in that deck that make it a little more interesting, where Maxx and all the other mechs are just all your cards do pretty much the same thing, and then sometimes you get to do your thing and it works out. So Mech isn't really the class for me, but you might enjoy it. If you're new to the game, I think Mechanologist and Maxx the Hype Nitro are a great hero to start with. So with that, that is going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.